Am I the a-hole for convincing my grandpa to kick out my aunt and refusing to help him change his mind back? I'm 19 male, so when it comes to family disputes, my opinions are usually brushed off in a let the adults handle this type of way. But for the first time, someone older than me took my advice. My grandfather and I are great friends. I'm closer to him than to anyone else in my family, but that's not to say I'm not close with my parents and siblings. Grandpa and I just kind of vibe. That's why he listens to what I say more than anyone in my family would expect him to. He took me out to lunch last week, as a grandfather does with his favorite grandchild, half joking. And he was ranting about his witch of a daughter and each of the epic fights they got into this past month. My aunt really is horrible. Trying to explain her whole dynamic would put me well over the 3,000 character limit. To give you an idea, 2 months ago at my sister's birthday dinner, she screamed at my dad to screw himself and waved a steak knife around. This was a nice restaurant where she was eating for free. There's also that time when my mom was pregnant with me and my eloquent aunt said, "I hope you freaking miscarry that turd in your C-word." I don't really know what else to say. This woman is mean. Anyways, talking with my mouth full of cheeseburger, I asked my grandpa, why haven't you kicked her out or at least started charging rent? He thought and said, "Yeah, my 54-year-old daughter can throw me a few hundred per month to live in my house." We laughed because my aunt is not a very agreeable person, and that conversation going down would be an event worth witnessing. We discussed and I convinced him to demand rent, and if she refused, to give her the boot. I wasn't present for the argument itself, but it went down as we expected. It was so bad that the neighbors called the cops, only the third time that has happened. Anyways, most of my family is mad that I inserted myself into the situation. They see me as a little boy still whose opinion is irrelevant. Maybe they're right. I'm 19 and everyone else is 40 to 80. But I don't like watching my grandparents go through hell living with her, so I said what I said. But crap has hit the fan, and now the entire family is divided. My grandpa has no intention of letting her back in, but my grandma wants him to. My mom is glad she's gone. Wonder why, right? And my dad doesn't like his sister very much, but he's worried all this drama will bite our family in the butt. There have been consequences. In-laws have revoked Christmas vacations that hadn't even been sent out yet, so we've pulled their Thanksgiving invitations. You get the gist. It's a whole mess. Now, people think if I talk to my grandpa, I can convince him to let her back in. They're probably right. I feel like I do have that influence. But so far, I've refused, because my grandpa's never been happier, and my grandma's starting to come around. Outside opinions, please. Now for the top comments. Not today, Hull. Dude, she's 54. Why the heck is she living with her parents? She is definitely jealous of your mom and probably has nothing better to do than stir up drama. You said what everyone was thinking, so don't feel bad about it. Oh yes, she's jealous. She's more jealous of my dad because he's her 6 years younger brother who's extremely successful and has a family of his own, while she slaves away at a job she hates. He has everything she can't have, and she's pissed about it. That being said, even my dad tolerates her for the sake of the family. The fact that her own brother and my father wants her back in their house is really what's making me question what's good for the whole family. Your father's advocating she go back to Grandpa, but I don't see him offering to take her in. It's funny that so many people seem to think you had no right to involve yourself in something that's not your business, while simultaneously doing the same. The only two people whose opinion matters here is Grandpa and Grandma. Grandpa's clearly got his mind made up, and it sounds like Grandma's starting to enjoy the fact that she's gone too. Not today, Hull. You aren't a hypnotist, and your grandpa's all his mental faculties. You didn't make him do anything. You can't make him do it. Why does this awful woman have control over half the family? She's actually nice to most of my extended family. Her rage really shines only in her immediate family. Somehow, over the years, she has befriended everyone who doesn't share her blood. At age 54, after decades of not paying rent for her entire adult life because she lived with her parents, that aunt should have quite a lot in savings. What strikes me about the story is how your grandparents might be vulnerable to elder abuse. Not saying that's what was happening, but it certainly sounds like she was taking advantage of them. Not today, Hull, if your grandparents are happier. It was their decision. The flying monkeys should butt out. She mistreats the hell out of them, but they fight back too. Both my grandma and grandpa grew up with very few families, so they have come to put family before everything, even when it defies all logic. It's taken a lot to get to this point, believe me. Now for the next story. Am I the a-hole for making my parents leave my house? I, 43 male, was finally able to purchase a neat 3-bedrooms, 2-baths house under my name for about 3 years now. Thankful for their support in order for me to live my best life, I agreed to let my parents move in with me after they decided to sell the smaller mobile home we previously lived in. However, one of the main boundaries I've set with them is that I did not want my sister, 40 female, Mackenzie, to enter my home. She and I had problems solving our fights and arguments growing up, which led to resentment, and we ultimately stopped speaking to each other by the time I graduated high school. I've tried to bury the hatchet numerous times in between, hoping that we could reach an understanding and get back in neutral terms, but Mackenzie never bothered to respond. So I left it at that. It minimized contact as well. If my parents wanted to see her, they would have to drive up to visit her themselves. I would drive them up there, or at the very least, they'd tell her to drop anything off in the driveway for them to pick up. But the biggest rule set was that she would not step into my house no matter what. By extension, this resulted in a distant relationship with my nephews/niece and brother-in-law, but I tried to be respectful when I happened to see them. Now, almost every other weekend, after policies lighten up and getting our vaccinations, I meet up with several of my long-term high school buddies and stay over at one of their places. Later that same evening I left, I realized I forgot to bring over some new wine that I bought for us all to share. And since we all lived a moderate distance from each other, I figured a 15-minute drive wouldn't kill me. But to my surprise, there's an extra car in my driveway. I recognized the license plate, and my heart dropped. I stormed into the house, and lo and behold, Mackenzie was here, and her children were playing with my dogs in the backyard. I was furious, and demanded my parents to explain why they allowed my sister to be inside. They reasoned that she was only in the dining room and wasn't doing anything wrong. I told Mackenzie to take her kids and leave, but not before she scoffed and called me a pathetic and selfish loner. My parents were mad at me for forcing Mackenzie to leave, but I argued that they broke the only single, most important boundary I asked of them. They said I was overreacting and that my house was also their shared space. They even said we were all still family, but I disagreed strongly with that statement because Mackenzie and I never solved our estranged relationship. I asked them if they had done this behind my back the times when I wasn't home, and they admitted to doing so. I felt overwhelmed and told them they were going to stay at Mackenzie's place for an indefinite amount of time. They apologized and told me to just get over it, but I refused. So they packed several of their belongings and I drove them up to my sister's house while getting an earful on the entire way there. Am I the a-hole? Not the a-hole. You are justified in having this boundary, and it's your house. If they wanted to see your sister, they could either have objected when you made the boundary, rather than sneaking behind your back, or just not move in with you. If the parents believed the rule was inconsequential and unimportant, they wouldn't have sneaked. In my opinion, this demonstrates they did it knowing full well it was wrong and knowing it broke a boundary. Not the a-hole at all. Not the a-hole. You might have to change your locks. Somehow your parents equated moving in with "we live here now, so it's our house too, so we can do what we want." That's not how it works. They apologized and told me to just get over it. Haha, that's not what an apology is. They're disrespectful. Not the a-hole. My house, my rules. If I let you live in my house, you do not have to like my rules. But you will comply with them or you won't live there anymore. You made one rule. They ignored it. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Not the a-hole. Next story. Am I the a-hole for telling my brother and his fiancée no? I recently moved in with my brother and his fiancée, trying to get my life back on track, and they gave me a place to stay because I was in a new city with no money. Since then, I've bounced around a couple of jobs, and that has made paying bills a little difficult. But I managed to do so by getting a small loan from my mother. The job hunt was as much physical as it was digital. I was in several job finding sites all day putting in applications. When I wasn't on my phone, I was riding my bike for several miles around town putting in applications. When I got a job finally, I began work right away and worked as much as possible. The job pays weekly and rent was due soon. I communicated with my brother that I didn't know how much my check would be, and that I didn't know if it would be enough to cover my portion of the bills. Surprise, it wasn't. Thankfully, my mother lent me the rest of my rent. I make sure to let everyone in the house understand my situation. Fast forward 2 weeks and fiancé tells me there is an additional $700 charge added to rent and I have to pay 1/3 of it. After a couple questions, she explains to me that it's because their dogs have done severe damage to the house/yard and the landlord wants a new security deposit. A day later, I was mulling that over in my head and decided it was not fair for me to pay for the damages caused by their dogs. The damage was done prior to me living there and was caused by their pets. Heavily damaged doors and frames chewed up, blinds chewed to bits, the stench of the dog waste throughout the house, and air that had been ripped up. As I explain to them that I think it's unfair, then it happens. Fiancé tells me it doesn't matter. I live in her house and have to pay for the damages her dogs caused, and my brother won't even acknowledge me. I firmly state that I disagree, and that I won't be paying. She smiles and says, "You can't even pay rent. You get mommy to pay it for you. Pay me or I'll kick you out." I retort, "Yes, I'm in debt to her, not you. Go ahead and kick me out." Cast a glance to my brother who is just sitting and staring at me without a word to say. She says, "Okay, you're out." Am I the a-hole for not agreeing to pay for damages? Now for the comments. Not the a-hole. The dog's damage has nothing to do with you. Unfortunately, it sounds like you will need to find a new place to live, but hopefully you won't have to deal with such nonsense and passive-aggressive behavior. You've done nothing wrong. Not only is it not Opie's problem, but it sounds like Opie's paying rent to live in a dump. Even the landlord is trying to be proactive about the obvious damage in his building. I wouldn't be surprised if his rent payment was inflated too. If they're comfortable being that blatant and taking advantage of him, what's to stop them from telling him that his share of bills is $100 or $200 higher than it actually should be? Not the a-hole. They were basically trying to use you to pay for their screw-ups. Also, I don't know your relationship with your mother, but when you're stable in your finances, I'd go pretty big for her next birthday/Mother's Day. She sounds like a very reliable person. She's a great mom and a great friend. Love her to the moon and back, and I do as much for her as I can. Not the a-hole. You shouldn't have to pay that. You're only renting the space where you sleep pretty much, right? Not the entire apartment. That is not your responsibility. The fiancé is just being a witch. But the problem is that now they're kicking you out. Either find your own place or go with your mom. Last story is titled, "Am I the a-hole for cutting off my housemate's internet when he refused to pay for it?" I've 25 male been living with my housemate 24 male for a little over a year now, and I've known him since college. We pay our rent separately to our landlord, and this place is great. Like, the only monthly expenses other than the rent is a cell phone bill, internet bill, and of course food, as the electricity and water are covered by the landlord. I don't know how or why, but I'm not complaining. He is a pretty chill landlord. He's retired and I get the sense that he just doesn't care anymore. My housemates and I agreed to split the cost of the internet bill, so we pay roughly $50 each. Or at least it should be that way. But a couple of months back, he decided he didn't want to pay his share of the internet, because I actually pay less than him in rent. Again, I don't know why, but I pay about $40 less than him. It's been an ongoing issue, but I'm not okay with him just not paying his share of the internet, especially for such a flimsy reason. The other day, I asked him again for the total amount he owed, which by this time was $150, and he told me to buzz off. I'm tired of you constantly nagging me. You save a ton with rent. Can't you help me out a little? $40 in rent difference, and this shoved a stick so far up his butt he doesn't want to give me my money? Fine. So I said, okay, logged into my router settings, and disconnected all of his devices, and changed the password. I just did not give a crap anymore. He came demanding I turn the internet back on. I told him no, unless he gave me the money owed. He started begging and said he had a meeting today that was really important. So I said, must not be that important if $150 is too much for you to give me for internet. You have your phone, hotspot from that. He left after that. Now there's so much tension in the house. Enough where I can cut it with a knife. Then he went off and complained to mutual friends. And a lot of them took his side in saying that I'm not a good friend, and that I shouldn't be blackmailing him like this. And I told him that I don't give a crap. If he wants to play games for a $40 rent discrepancy, I'm down to play games. And unless he gives me now $200 for messing with me, I'm not letting him use my internet. Now a few took my side saying the dude is a mooch, and was just itching to find any way to save any amount of money. So I'm turning to you all. Am I the a-hole? Sorry for the overall tone of the post, but I'm pissed. Not the a-hole. Seems like he's just used to getting what he wants, and you gave him a wake-up call. Stand your ground and get your money. You're not his parent, you don't have to pay his bills. Especially if you let it add up to this amount without having a talk with you first if he needed help. At first he said, I'll get you the money ASAP, or can you wait until my next pay? To eventually what was described above in the post. And I'm just here, feeling I have egg on my face for letting it go so long. Everyone has their breaking point. This is a classic case of mistaking kindness for weakness, and your roommate is learning that the hard way. Not a-hole. It gets shut off if he was paying the ISP directly. Just because he's a friend doesn't mean he can play by different rules than everyone else. Yes, but his underlying motivation, after the initial song and dance, for not paying, is because OP pays $40 less in rent, apparently. That analogy doesn't really work. Not a-hole. Your rent is completely separate from your internet service. He agreed to pay half and hasn't been doing that. Your mistake was in allowing him to go 2 months without paying. If your roommate has a problem with the difference in rental charges, he should take it up with the landlord. Definitely feels like I have egg on my face now for letting 2 months go by. Housemate, I don't want to pay for my share of the internet. OP shuts off his internet access. Housemate, surprise Pikachu face. Not a-hole. You got yourself a mooch on your hands, my dude. Rent should be completely separate from shared bills. Also, where do you live? If you're in GTA, I'll be your roommate in a heartbeat if all I had to do was give you $50 and pay rent. Y'all are blessed to find such a place.